Hello, everybody. It's me again, Andre, and I'm going to be discussing the different types of government, and this is going to be the part three, or the finale, if you will. So we're just going to continue where we left off in the last video, the part two of the different types of government. If you haven't checked that out, please do. So let's go on to the first one for this video, which is military dictatorship. Okay. So, what is a military dictatorship? It's basically just a form of government where the leaders, okay, or the dictators, are the military power of a certain nation. Okay, it could be led by any armed force, and they basically do this in order to reach a certain goal. And this only happened in history when there was instability and there was social inorder in their nation. That's basically what a military dictatorship is. Now we have a monarchy. A monarchy is basically just a system of government where there is a monarch. Okay? The monarch can be a king, can be a queen, a prince, and a princess, any which way. And there are two types of monarchies. Absolute monarchy, the first type, which means that these monarchies, the absolute monarchies, the monarchs have absolute power. Okay, they basically have all of the power. And the constitution of a certain nation doesn't affect them. They can do whatever they want, whether it be politically, legally, or anything. They can get away with it. That is an absolute monarchy. And the second type of monarchies is constitutional monarchy, which are limited. Okay, constitutional monarchies have monarchs that are limited with power, and they're practically just there for social practices or traditional practices that they have been doing for centuries. Okay, and that is what a monarchy is. So the next is the oligarchy. The oligarchy basically just means the rule of the few. So if you could take that definition of an oligarchy, you can definitely deduce that the oligarchy is just a group of people leading a certain nation, a whole nation, or a whole state. Okay? And these people typically have a lot of money. They typically have a lot of money and power. Okay? And the next is plutocracy. Plutocracy is closely related to oligarchies because the people who rule a plutocracy are basically filthy rich. They are filthy rich and they have so much wealth that they could use it upon in which to enforce their own power. And that's basically the form of government that they have based on their own wealth. Okay? And that's basically it. Okay? So let's go to the next, which is republicanism. Okay? So republicanism isn't actually a type of government, but it can be. It's more like an ideology or a belief, okay? A belief system. Republicanism is basically, okay, they basically just advocate for the public ownership of everything, okay? The public ownership of the means of production, okay? And they sort of follow a socially they sort of follow a socially centered view of the government or of politics. Okay, so that's republicanism. And the next one is socialism. Okay, socialism is kind of like republicanism. Okay, because they also advocate for the means of production being given to the public. Okay, sort of like the people. The people are the ones who are supposed to be in control, and that is the sort of the essence of socialism. The next would be statism. Okay, so statism is basically okay. Statism is basically just statism is basically just a sort of doctrine. Okay, it's a sort of a doctrine that advocates for or supports the idea that the government should be interfering. It should be interfering with the country's affairs, with the country's political affairs. Okay? More or less, they want the government to be involved in everything that the country has to deal with. So technocracy, okay? Technocracy, if we simplify technocracy, it's basically just a form of government wherein the leaders, okay, the leaders of this nation, they follow a sort of approach, a sort of expert-based approach, okay? And it's kind of related to meritocracy, wherein they also want the leaders to have an ability for something that they need, or a talent or whatsoever that they need in order to for example, pass laws or so much more. Okay, so they basically just follow a sort of scientific approach to governance, scientific and a rational approach to governments, based on what can socially benefit them. So the next would be theocracy. Okay, so theocratic countries or nations, basically they operate in a way that whatever religion they have, whatever main religion that the country has, okay, they follow that. They follow that all the way throughout their legislative, their judicial systems, okay? So basically, the doctrines, the scripture of whatever religion they have, they use that as a guideline in order to govern their nation. That's what a theocracy is. And totalitarianism, you may have already heard this from humanities class. Totalitarianism is basically just this form of government, okay? It's like, you can think of it as authoritarianism, but an extremely sort of like an extreme version of it. So totalitarianism, they basically have a dictator, okay? They have a dictator, and this dictator is basically pushing propaganda through the citizens, and that propaganda serves to benefit the dictator, and the dictator sort of like has this ideological view or a belief that they want to accomplish, that they want to implement into their country, okay? And they basically oppose the idea of political opposition. So in other words, the dictator is basically the total power. He basically holds total power over the whole nation. And the last form of government that we have is tribalism. And tribalism basically just advocates for tribes being the ones who are running a certain region or country or nation, okay, instead of formal citizens, formal civilization, okay. So thank you for watching. If you learned anything, please subscribe, and thank you.